They thought I was just the girl who used to pour coffee at family dinners, until I walked into the boardroom and the CFO stood up and called me boss. Hi, I'm Lena. A year ago, my step-family left me off a major business deal because they still saw me as the quiet outsider. But while they laughed behind closed doors, I was signing the papers to buy the company they were about to pitch to. What happened next? It wasn't revenge. It was something better. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments. And if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way, I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. The rain had been falling steadily all afternoon, tapping out a quiet rhythm against the glass wall behind me. From the 54th floor, the city looked hazy and slow, like it hadn't made up its mind about anything yet. I hadn't planned to check my inbox again before heading out, but something about the little red dot blinking at the corner of my screen tugged at me. When I clicked it open, my stomach tightened. The message was anonymous. No name, no subject line. Just a forwarded thread titled Work Thread, Family Ops Chat. I stared for a long moment before clicking. The first thing I saw was my name. Meetings at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Can we skip Looping and Lena again? Tyler had typed. She'll just complicate things like she did with that whole equity model nonsense. She still thinks this is a co-op, Sienna replied. Let her live out her garage startup dreams. She's not built for these rooms. Tyler responded with a laughing emoji. I didn't feel anything at first. Not anger, not shame. Just a kind of calm that comes when you've already rehearsed the hurt and know exactly where to put it. I closed the tab slowly, my fingers light against the trackpad. The room was quiet except for the hum of the espresso pod machine, which I hadn't touched in weeks. Jasmine's voice came in through the intercom. Still here, Ms. Park? I am, I said. Can you come in for a minute? She arrived in under 10 seconds, crisp in posture, dressed in navy like always. I nodded toward the whiteboard across the room. Clear the 2B boardroom. I want it prepped for video and audio. Full security recording, no branding, I said. Also, notify legal. Tomorrow's meeting, 2 p.m. sharp. Jasmine gave a small nod. Understood. Will you be attending as yourself? Not quite, I said. Let's keep it quiet until they're seated. As she turned to go, I reached for the merger folder sitting beside my laptop. The cover was matte black, unmarked. Inside, the final acquisition contract for Whitman Therapeutics. Pages of effort, strategy, legal nuance, all tied back to a single truth. I built something they didn't see coming. My pen moved across the last signature line. Lena Park, CEO, NovaPath Biotech. I set the pen down, then opened the drawer beside me. It was nearly empty except for a single photo, me at 17, standing beside my mother under a gray sky at Zilker Park. She had one hand on my shoulder and the faintest smile. I studied it, letting the moment soften the corners of my thoughts. You were right, I whispered. I didn't need a seat. I just needed to build my own table. The door opened again, gently this time. Jasmine stepped in, her voice even. They confirmed for tomorrow, 2 p.m., Boardroom 2B, she said. Then she added, they still think the buyer's some old MIT investor with a private fund. I smiled faintly, folding the photo closed and sliding it back into the drawer. Perfect, I said. Let them. They erased me from the family history like I was a typo. Not with screaming or slamming doors, just quiet edits. Photos rearranged, last names omitted, a name no longer spoken aloud. I wasn't kicked out. I was simply brushed aside. The year my mother died, 2015, I was 17. She passed in a small hospital room in Dallas with the windows half covered and the scent of antiseptic clinging to the curtains. Victoria didn't come. She sent flowers. Robert stayed 20 minutes, long enough to shake hands with the attending physician. Tyler and Sienna didn't even know what floor we were on. By the end of that month, Victoria had rearranged the hallway gallery at home. Family portraits, graduation pictures, framed awards. Mine were gone. One photo remained, tucked in the corner behind a ceramic vase. I watched her adjust it without a glance in my direction. That night, over dinner, no one said my mother's name. It was at one of those family strategy dinners a few months later. Victorian-style lamb, no phones allowed, linen napkins folded into stiff triangles, when I made the mistake of speaking up. Robert had been talking about employee turnover and innovation fatigue at Whitman Therapeutics. I mentioned equity sharing, how some of the most resilient startups in Silicon Valley were doing it to increase loyalty. The silence that followed could have sliced marble. Victoria set down her wine glass. "That's idealistic," she said carefully, as though swatting away a gnat. Tyler chuckled into his napkin. "She's been reading Twitter threads again." "Maybe she'd be better in support," Robert added. "Every company needs logistics people. Quiet types. Organized." I didn't say another word that evening. I finished my peas, cleared my plate, and stacked the dishes while they moved on to dessert. No one asked me to stay. That fall, I moved into a single dorm room at a state college nearby, took a job bussing tables at a Korean barbecue place off Greenville Avenue, and spent my nights on forums learning about neural interface design. My mom had always said I had a knack for patterns, that if I ever learned to trust my own pace, I'd surprise everyone. In the winter of 2018, I found myself in a small cafe in East Austin. Wood-paneled walls, secondhand tables, and espresso that always tasted slightly burned, but it was quiet, and that mattered. I sketched a system on a paper napkin, 3 concentric nodes, each linked with real-time feedback loops, something that could revolutionize diagnostic biotech automation. I didn't know then that it would become NovaPath's first patented process. I just knew it felt like mine. I kept that napkin, pressed it between 2 pages of my college physics textbook, carried it from sublet to sublet like it was a passport. Now, in 2023, I keep it framed in my private office behind the desk where no one ever looks. The edges are yellowed, but the ink is still there, and so is the clarity I felt when I drew it. Jasmine knocked twice before entering. "Legal's done," she said. "Final approval came through this morning. All signatures are in. Just a press announcement left." I nodded, still holding the sketch in my lap. She lingered. "Also, rumor mills started. Word is the board thinks the mystery buyer is a reclusive MIT billionaire, some ghost fund out of Boston." I looked at her and smiled. Not smug, just quiet. "Let them think that," I said. Outside, the rain had paused. The city was beginning to shine again, rooftops slick with reflected light. Somewhere below, Tyler and Sienna were probably practicing their charm for tomorrow's pitch, still thinking the world made sense when you dressed for it. But I knew better now. You don't have to shout to rewrite a story. You just need to hold the pen long enough. There was a time I thought a seat at their table was all I needed. A chair, a chance, a little space to speak. I used to imagine it with childish precision, the feel of the linen napkin, the shine of the glassware, my name on a folded card. But those chairs had always been reserved. What I never saw coming was that one day I wouldn't need their table at all. Now I stood alone on the boardroom level of NovaPath's headquarters, watching the muted feed from our lobby camera. "Tyler and Sienna just walked in," Jasmine said quietly beside me. They brought their best, we're the deal energy. The screen showed them laughing near the coffee bar, leaning in too close to the receptionist, making sure everyone could see the designer labels on their sleeves. Sienna flipped her hair back and whispered something that made Tyler chuckle, like he'd just closed $1 billion deal. "Any guesses what they're saying?" I asked, arms crossed. "They're probably wondering which hedge fund genius is lucky enough to acquire their legacy," Jasmine said. Deadpan. I didn't answer right away. My eyes lingered on Sienna's heels, unscuffed, impractical, and the way Tyler leaned on the counter like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Entitlement, like posture, is hard to fake. "I think it's time," I said. "Let's prep." Jasmine nodded once and disappeared through the side corridor. I walked into my office, the hum of recycled air and distant traffic settling around me. I moved with purpose, No wasted motion. From the coat rack, I pulled down a navy blazer with subtle silver thread at the cuffs, tailored but simple. I stepped into polished flats, slipped on the thin, rectangular glasses I didn't need, and paused in front of the mirror. The woman staring back didn't look like someone's forgotten stepdaughter. She looked like structure. Clean lines, soft jaw, calm breath. I adjusted the watch on my wrist, my mother's. The gold had dulled over the years, but it still ticked with quiet certainty. Outside, the corridor stretched ahead, sun pouring in through glass that reached the floor. My footsteps echoed as I walked, each one steady, measured. I passed the frosted door of Boardroom 2B, where voices were beginning to rise behind it. "They probably think I'm the coordinator," I muttered. "They think a lot of things," Jasmine replied, standing by the entrance. "Mostly wrong." She gave me a look, cool, unreadable, and placed her hand on the door handle. "You sure?" she asked. I nodded once. "They're not the ones I'm trying to convince anymore." Jasmine pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Thank you both for arriving early," she said, her voice calm and efficient. "The CEO will join you shortly." I stood just outside the glass, the warmth of the late morning sun pressing gently against my back. The marble floor beneath me caught my reflection. Small, distant, but unmistakably mine. Jasmine looked back at me. "Ready?" she asked. I exhaled slowly, feeling my shoulders square, my fingers relax around the folder I carried. "Let's begin." When I stepped into the room, Tyler was halfway through a sentence about champagne preferences, and Sienna was inspecting her nails like they might give her an edge in negotiations. Neither of them looked up immediately. It took a beat, then two. Sienna glanced up first. Her expression didn't change right away, just a polite flicker, the kind you give an unfamiliar intern. Then something shifted behind her eyes, a twitch of recognition. Her brow lifted just slightly. Tyler turned next, and his smile faltered. "Wait. Lena?" he said, blinking. "What, are you shadowing someone?" I didn't answer. I walked past them, calm, unhurried. The soft clack of my heels over the stone tile echoed louder than any greeting. At the head of the table, I placed my folder down and clicked it open with quiet precision. Sienna let out a tight laugh. "You're kidding. This is a joke, right? Are we being filmed?" Jasmine, standing to the side, didn't blink. She turned to them, voice smooth. "Tyler, Sienna, please meet the CEO of Novapath Biotech." Silence, thick and unforgiving, settled in the room. Tyler shook his head slowly. No way. You're not the CEO, you're, what, support staff. I saw your resume once. Community college. Redacted resume," I replied, still not sitting. "A calculated leak, and Novapath does not discriminate based on origin schools, by the way." They were both staring now, trying to piece it together like a broken mirror. I could feel them scrambling. "You're buying Whitman Therapeutics?" Sienna asked, her voice pitched higher than usual. "I already did," I said. I slid a printed document across the table. "Signed, sealed, and board approved. Effective this morning." Tyler glanced at the header, his jaw tightening. "This is a hostile move." "No," I corrected. "This is business. The board accepted the offer 2 weeks ago. You were simply too busy planning your charm pitch to notice." Sienna's hand flew to her temple, brushing hair behind her ear like she could reset the moment. "This isn't legal. You faked everything." "Nothing was faked," I said. "It was all built, quietly. While you mocked, I moved." I gestured to the second folder. "This outlines the new structure. Certain departments will merge. Your roles, of course, will be reassessed." Tyler stepped forward. "This is about revenge. You're bitter." "I'm effective," I replied, my voice steady. "You inherited access. I earned control." That stopped him. Sienna slapped the table. "You manipulated everyone, even Mom." "Especially her," I said, cutting in. "She chose to forget me long ago. Now she'll remember." Across the table, A water glass tipped over, spilling across the polished wood. Tyler didn't even notice. His hands were clenched at his sides, eyes fixed on the document in front of him, like it might rewrite itself if he stared hard enough. I closed my folder, adjusted the crease in my blazer, and stepped back from the table. "There's nothing left to contest," I said. "You'll receive onboarding packets by end of day." I turned, walking toward the door. Behind me, neither of them moved, but just before I reached the threshold, I paused. "Lunch is served on the 12th floor now," I added without turning around. "Staff rotation schedule begins Monday. I suggest you both be early." The door clicked shut behind me, sealing the room in the silence they once ruled. If Tyler and Sienna were warm-up acts, Victoria was the headline performance. They had mocked me, dismissed me, forgotten me, but she had erased me, cleanly, deliberately. I wasn't walking into this room for satisfaction. I came for truth. The executive boardroom at the top of Novapath Tower was colder than the rest of the building by design. Pale walls, brushed steel fixtures, no warmth in the art or the furniture. It was a room made for decisions, not feelings, and Victoria looked perfectly at home in it. She sat at the head of the table, a pearl pen resting neatly on her notepad, posture impeccable. Her tailored suit was a muted charcoal, hair pinned back in the same polished bun she'd worn the day she told me I was a transitional inconvenience. 2 board members sat across from her, flipping through packets. They were polite but distant, brought in late, likely told to observe and advise, not act. Victoria tapped her pen once, then looked up as the door opened. Her eyes met mine. She didn't flinch, but I watched the microseconds pass, the recognition, the disbelief, the adjustment. She leaned back slightly, just enough to regain her balance. "Lena," she said, lips forming the word like it tasted off. "Mrs. Whitman," I replied. There was a silence then. It wasn't awkward, it was sharp. "I see the rumors were inaccurate," she said coolly. "You're not an investor proxy." "I'm not," I said, taking my place at the opposite end of the table. "I'm the principal." She studied me. "You've evolved." "No," I said simply. "You just stopped looking." I opened my folder and slid copies to the 2 board members. Novapath has finalized acquisition of Whitman Therapeutics. Effective immediately, all operations, branding, and research pipelines will fall under the Novapath structure. Victoria didn't look at the papers. "This is unnecessary dramatization. We could have restructured internally." "No," I replied. "You had years to do that. This is accountability." I moved through the agenda. Employee equity programs, department consolidations, ethics oversight. The new structure removed half of the inherited executive bloat, titles without impact, power without contribution. It wasn't a takedown, it was a reset. Victoria waited until I paused to breathe. "You sound emotional," she said softly. "That's not leadership, that's sentimentality disguised as progress." I looked her directly in the eye. "You silenced my name," I said. "I built one you can't touch." One of the board members shifted in his chair. "The vote passed 2 weeks ago," I added. "This meeting is a courtesy." Victoria's hand hovered over her notepad, then slowly dropped. She didn't write a word. Across the table, the small red light on the conference camera blinked, recording every second. "You orchestrated this," she said. "Years of manipulation." "No," I said. "Years of work. While you taught your children to wield privilege, I learned to build systems. You mentored short-term gain. I studied legacy." She didn't respond. Not right away. Just watched me like she was cataloging something she hadn't expected to see, something she might have missed if she hadn't been so busy curating her own story. I gathered my papers and rose. "Board decisions will proceed per schedule," I said. "Your seat remains, but ceremonial. All voting rights have been reassigned under merger terms." Victoria's jaw moved slightly, but no words came out. At the door, I paused. "Oh, and Sunday dinner," I said, voice calm. "I believe I'll be attending after all." I stepped out without waiting for a reaction. But just as the door began to close, I caught it. The faintest falter in her face. Not fear, not anger, recognition. The kind you only give to someone you finally see. They called it revenge in the headlines. Estranged stepdaughter reclaims empire. Silent CEOs takeover shocks biotech industry. But the truth was quieter than all of that. It wasn't vengeance. It was restoration. 1 year had passed since the merger. Autumn sunlight now poured through the wide windows of the Nova Path Whitman cafeteria, glinting off metal trays and polished floors. The place felt different, open, alive. Even the air seemed to carry less weight. I stood near the far window, nursing a paper cup of green tea, watching 2 interns huddle over a tablet at one of the communal tables. They were laughing softly, arguing over data points in a clinical trial. Their eagerness reminded me of those nights in the cafe years ago, when all I had was an idea scribbled on a napkin and a stubborn belief that there had to be a better way. Now that napkin was framed behind my desk upstairs. The ink had faded, but the lines still held. 42%, Jasmine said beside me, handing over the latest quarterly, and retention's holding, especially among the junior researchers. I smiled, nodding, because we listened to them. Still want to keep that open feedback channel? Always, I said, especially when it's inconvenient. She gave a short laugh. Tyler and Sienna are already waiting upstairs. Boardroom 3. C. I finished my tea and set the cup down. How's Tyler doing with the client empathy program? Better than expected. He doesn't interrupt as much anymore. And Sienna? She flagged 3 suppliers last quarter for ethics violations, Jasmine said, on her own. I didn't flinch, but I let the pride settle somewhere deep, quiet. It wasn't about redemption, it was about responsibility. We rode the elevator in silence. When the doors opened, I walked ahead into the boardroom. Tyler stood first, smoothing his shirt. Sienna looked up from her notes. Neither overperformed. No dramatics, no performance. Just readiness. Good morning, I said. Morning, they answered in near unison. We moved through the meeting with ease. Metrics, projections, pilot programs. Tyler offered a thoughtful note about post-treatment patient surveys. Sienna referenced a logistics report by name. They were learning, slowly but meaningfully. At the end, I stood, collecting my binder. Keep pushing the teams toward clarity, I told them. Progress without accountability is just noise. They nodded, not as siblings, as colleagues. Back in my office, I paused by the framed napkin. The lines had blurred just a little. Still, I could see the outline of the system that started it all. Outside, the Austin skyline shimmered under the late afternoon light. The same city where I'd once waited tables, walked home in the dark, and learned to code by flickering screen. I didn't do this to punish them, I murmured, almost to myself. I did it to build what they never could. And I meant it. Looking out over the city, I saw the skyline I once feared I'd never belong to. But here I was, not with a crown, but with clarity. Sometimes the family we're born into doesn't recognize who we are becoming. But if we lead with intention and heart, we can create a space where dignity, effort, and quiet strength speak louder than inheritance. Legacy, I've learned, isn't given. It's built, one thoughtful decision at a time. If this story reminded you of a moment when you had to find your own voice, I'd love to hear it. Feel free to share your thoughts. I'm listening.